Hey there guys, today we're coming to you with a very unexpected head-to-head review, the MTH versus Scaletrains CSX number 911. Now before we get rolling too far into this, I wanted to thank my buddy David, NC Rail Adventures here on YouTube, for letting me borrow his Scaletrains 911 on short notice for this video. So kudos dude, I appreciate it. You're making this video possible. So the next thing I want to address is probably the biggest question on deck. Why bother with this head-to-head and review? Well, the main thing being, the Scaletrains 911 is absolutely phenomenal. They nailed these ES44s, as you will see. But let's just say you were in a spot where you didn't have $300 to toss in a locomotive fully loaded with sound, or you just wanted a 911, you know, just to have on display as like a desk piece or just to hang out with. There are alternatives, and that's where the MTH comes in, and a lot better than you might think. And before MTH got completely steamrolled, I wanted to bring this to attention so you guys can see it's not too bad for one final effort. So if you wanted the budget 911, this will be your option on the market because the recently announced Walther's mainline, I do not believe, made the production cut. So if you want a model of 911, you'll either be getting a Scaletrains or you'll be chasing down an MTH. So which of these two comes out on top? Let's dive right in to find out. So for the first segment here, I'm not going to go straight to any one locomotive. I'm just going to show you all some side-by-sides just so you can see that these are a lot closer than you might think. Alright, so the way we're going to do this, we're just going to work our way around the locomotives, different sections compared head to head, save a little time. It won't be nearly as long, hopefully, as the CSX 1776 review, so you guys can rest easy there. One thing to be made perfectly clear, if you are looking the absolute detailed out the wazoo version, go for the Scaletrains. If you are on a budget and can't find the Scaletrains, take a look at the MTH with some slight upgrades. I think you'll be very happy with what you can do. So starting up front, we're going to do a few different takes on this. Namely, we're going to start on the front end, we're going to cover the tops, just so you can see things are a little bit closer than they may seem. So, first on deck, number boards. Scaletrains, of course, wins this fight because they're smaller, they're a bit more prototypical, they light up just as well as the MTH do, but the Scaletrains' appearance is a bit more scale and a bit crisper. This is due... The MTH is more so kind of a flat printing here. The MTH, or the Scaletrains, is hidden behind an acrylic piece, which makes it look more like a real number board sheet. So that's the kudos there. Going on down the nose, the grabs and even the interiors match up. They're the exact same shade of tan. Again, where the MTH falls off is they lift the window decal off. Scaletrains, of course, has this. Moving on down the nose, the next biggest thing. Door. I addressed this in the MTH review. They had it correct for 1776 and 3194. This is not correct for 911. 911 was a different stage build ES44, so the door was on the right-hand side, as you'll see on these Scaletrains. What's very interesting is all the printing, with the exception of the placement, is spot on. All the decals that are on the Scaletrains model are present on the MTH. Even the walkway light, that's drilled out here on the MTH. Operable on the Scaletrains, not so much here, but it is there. One cool little tiny piece both models actually got correct was the stop before boarding insignia right here on the front little pilot area. MTH got it, as did Scaletrains. I was very pleasantly surprised to see MTH got this part correct. Obviously in O gauge I could see them pulling it off. HO was a bit of a question, but they made it work. The next big thing comes on the front of the deck plate. So 1776 and 911 both got these little star decals on the front plate. This can be remedied on the MTH with the sheeted decals, as can the rest of the missing logos. So you can fix this, but if you want it straight from factory, Scaletrains is going to have it correct. Moving on down to the plow area. Scaletrains got crazy on the detail, and I mean, we're talking the electrical cable here with the clasp going to the deck plate. I've seen nobody do this in HO scale. No manufacturer prior to Scaletrains has done this. Maybe brass if you're lucky, but in terms of plastic, this is the first time this has been done. And I know this is a very small detail, but when you see it in person, it looks so much better, because for years we've been so used to doing Kato and any other company with kind of the free-floating cable here. With that tie-in, it just seals the deal in looking the part. And carrying on down, there are more airlines, there's different cables. The one right beside the coupler looks really good. There's a few more loops in it per the prototype. These are a little bit thinner. The MTH, of course, will be thicker plastic, but they too look good. The snowplow, of course, is a little bit different. The MTH sits a little higher and a little more angled, but this is off a different tier, ES44. This is as 911 sits right now. So up top is where it gets really interesting, because MTH did a lot better than most people are ever going to give them credit for. We're just going to go on down the side of the engines real quick and start back out at the rear radiators. Both locomotives actually come with etched metal coverings over the rear radiators and fan sections. The one difference being the Scaletrains has more of a flat appearance on top, which is prototypically accurate, and the MTH has a raised hump in the middle, as you can see by this big divider here. Fan detail isn't bad. Of course, the MTH is a little more recessed in compared to the Scaletrains, where you can see a lot more fan and latch detail. To get a quick look at the exhaust and horn, Scaletrains has the correct silver stack, and the RS5T actually has the white end caps present on the model. The MTH just went for a red plastic stack, which you can fix as a paint, and the 5-chime horn, while accurate, doesn't quite fit the bill. And of course, we have the little chunky lift rings in comparison to the Scaletrains. These are a lot finer, but I will say this, the MTH are very solid, so you can handle your locomotive without the lift rings going into space. Taking a quick look up top, we have two completely different setups for the roof. The MTH being the older ES44 style, but things still look really, really nice. The one main difference is the black painted grab on the Scaletrains versus the white there, and the addition of the PTC antenna array and the lacking of that back piece on the MTH. Alright, so going alongside the cabs, this is where things surprisingly are a lot closer than you may think, minus the few noted details. So we'll start off with the MTH this time. What's missing? The window decal. The Scaletrains, of course, has it here. The printing, however, is really, really close. The 911 here is a little bit fatter and less pronounced. The Scaletrains, on the other hand, with the darker paint, gives a more pronounced look to all the lettering, the numbers, and the printing. So that's a plus to a smidge darker paint. The MTH, however, matches this to a T with the decoration. Even the GE builder's plate and warning label are present on the MTH, with the exception of a little bit of extra spacing between these two. So given the nature of this balanced shot, I'm going to rush through this part a little quickly. Don't worry, the MTH is taking the load on the bottom. But I did this namely to show y'all just how close the side profiles can get on these engines. Obviously, like I said, we all know the Scaletrains is literally the top dog in this situation. But the MTH holds its weight very well. And I mean this in a few simple details. The printing. The printing matches up pretty much par with the Scaletrains. Both locomotives feature etched metal grills. MTH, of course, is a little bit darker and a little bit fatter tooling, but it looks the part. In terms of your decoration throughout this side of the locomotive, the most pleasing to me, obviously detail-wise, is the Scaletrains, but I do like the MTH a smidge more in terms of the printing, the Pride and Service. I know that's something minute, but you can really see it here. The Pride and Service kind of blends into the panel lines, and it looks a smidge squished. On the MTH, it's broadside and out there for you to see. A minute detail, but something you'll notice nonetheless when you spend a lot of time photographing or looking at this locomotive. And going back to the rear, the Honoring Our First Responders looks really good on both. In fact, the spacing's almost even. If anything, the MTH is just a little shorter. What's even more so surprising is when you look at the detail on the Scaletrains under the radiator section, it's mostly present on the MTH. The way the stripes fade in and out and kind of kick the bottom of the section, that is present on this locomotive as well. Detail-wise, again, Scaletrains is top dog. The rear truck detail with the chains, the rotating bearing caps, and even the fuel tank with all the separately applied bits, sanding lines, etc., it wins out tenfold. Now for taking the party to the back, this is where things get a little crazy. So the biggest differences that jump out to me right out of the gate, of course the MTH is missing the rear banner. This has been well documented and well noted because of the licensing and just, issues in printing. Another thing slightly off is the CSX logo. The Scaletrains, of course, is right with it being dead center in the grab irons. The MTH settled for a little lower on the car body. Now, this is a pad printing thing. It can happen. It's one of those things where it should have been caught probably, but it still looks the part for someone with an untrained eye. Carrying on down, the rear pilot details on both of these locomotives are phenomenal. MTH, of course, has fatter metal handrails, so that's going to stand out more. The Scaletrains are a nice fine plastic, but unlike another company, they will not fall when you sneeze on it, and you can actually handle your engine without risk of it being destroyed. So, always a big kudos to Scaletrains for designing better plastic handrails. The absolute winner to me is the Scaletrains, but again, you can't count out the MTH a ton because this is still really nicely done. The painted spare knuckles, both locomotives have that. The extra air lines and MU cables both have that. This one obviously wins with the finer plastic and finer detail, so it looks the part more so in front of the camera. The electrical cable, again, this is a cool touch with the little clasp on the deck plate. The MTH does not have this, but it does have the painted end caps, like the red and the green you see here, are also present on the MTH. So not a bad hustle at all. And even the coupler lift bars, red and white, red and white. So not too bad of a dogfight here. So that's enough yapping about detail and decoration. Just sum it up shortly, the winner, as expected, is the Scaletrains. But the MTH didn't get sucker punched on the first throw. No, it held its own pretty good. Now, let's dive into operations and sounds. So, if you missed my little note earlier, this was the MTH DCC ready, equipped with the Lok V5 and a single fuel tank mounted 28mm speaker. The Scaletrains is factory Lok V5 with a dual sugar cube speaker sitting in the back of the radiator housing. This is on factory volumes. This has been bumped up just a little bit, mainly on the horn and bell, and toning the prime mover down a little bit. So, in terms of smaller notes, the Scaletrains has Keep Alive. This does not. In terms of weight and tracking, though, both are very, very heavy. But the Scaletrains, of course, takes the cake here, too. It is an absolute chunk of a locomotive. I'm fairly sure you could walk a 50-car train no problem with this locomotive solo on level track. Alright, so first we'll hit the Scaletrains. We'll do a drivetrain test and a horn and sound check as well. That auto e-bell is programmed into the sound file, which can be disabled. I disabled it on mine as soon as I got it on the programmer. So overall, the drivetrain is really good and quiet and smooth, what we've come to expect from Scaletrains. Alright, so with the engine fired up, we can see a few things the MTH does not have, namely the illuminated front, rear, and side walkway lights. Beyond that, though, pretty even playing field. Illuminated number boards, very bright head and ditch lights. Now for the MTH. Naturally, being a Lok 5, I had a little fun with this sound file. There's a few extra bits and pieces that are not going to be present on the Scaletrains. One thing you will notice, though, and I've confirmed this, the CSX Trio were supposed to have custom sound files with all 3 of their horns actually recorded. This didn't quite make the production. So, you're going to hear the default RS5T on the Lok sound file on their website is a bit more crisp and kicking than what came on the Scaletrains. Alright, so here's horn and bell. Much more accurate for 911. Coupler crash, I had a little fun. I loaded these for Microsoft Train Simulator. So the engine muted, we'll check the drivetrain, a few extra fun sounds I put on here. So function 13 and 14 I had some fun with.
Officers on the pursuit call. Suspect vehicle was last seen southbound on Highway 99. Units to reference their GPS for position. Stand by for updates. Yeah, this guy's running. I gotta chase him.
It's quite literally the cat's meow. So overall, the MTH brings a very smooth and robust drivetrain to the table too. It's a little noisier than the Scaletrains, but for an 8-pin DCC install, this ain't bad at all. The cam motor's still very smooth. I've had good luck with it pulling. It's obviously a little less heavy than the Scaletrains, but this is still a very, very capable locomotive. So don't let that deter you in terms of thinking you're getting a lemon locomotive, because that's not the case with these MTH DCC ready. Most of the flack for MTH locomotives comes from the chunky metal handrails and the DCS system not quite playing nice with DCC. And when you get the DCC ready locomotives, all that's out of the equation. You get a stripped down model you can do what you want with. And I've been very happy with this locomotive. And now just for fun, we'll do a little drag test. So 911 up front is sitting dead in the water. It has not even been addressed. We'll try to pull it with the MTH. So it has a lot better luck shoving it backwards than it does pulling forward, but both locomotives have proven They're both very capable. But as expected, the Scaletrains does edge out the competition with a heftier drivetrain and a little bit more weight. So before the Keep Alive ran out, you saw a very quick clip of what you're getting in terms of headlight brightness. Both locomotives are very bright, very responsive, and do the job very well. Even with almost a $150 price gap between the two, DCC ready versus fully loaded, you're still getting a decent little engine for the money. And that said, if you have the means and you're able to grab one, Scaletrains is an excellent opportunity that I highly recommend. But in the event you are on a budget or you just can't afford, $600 to $900 on a few Spirit locomotives, this is a good alternative for you. So before we wrap up, I'm going to cover a few more closing notes, namely investments, because that's the big deal here. Alright, Scaletrains, fully loaded, exceptional model, will set you back about $299 from Scaletrains or a dealer that managed to get a hold of these, because these went absurdly quick. So, if you can get one, or you have one coming, this is going to be a phenomenal locomotive. I love my 1776 to death. Speakers are a little quiet, but beyond that, runs like a watch, looks phenomenal, and they did this paint job justice. Now, the MTH, let's just say you cannot get a hold of a Scaletrains. You won't be hurting too bad if you get this locomotive. Mine's equipped with Lok V5, as I said, so it runs just as smooth as the Scaletrains. The drivetrain, the motor are both really good. It's got good weight, and the fuel tank mounted speaker gives an extra ounce of oomph that the Scaletrains lacks on the top end, especially with a GE sound file. And if you can't quite afford the Scaletrains, don't feel bad. This is a nice representation of 911. Spend 10 more bucks for a decal sheet. You can apply all the extra stuff that it's missing, and it'll work just as good on your layout. So all in all, I'm a big fan of what MTH did with this. It's not perfect, no, but it was a nice way to end off their HO product lines. Now that said, we don't know what's quite becoming MTH, something I believe has been cooking in the wings, which we will hopefully find out after the big train show here in January, but stay tuned on all that. In the meantime, if you can find one, give it a shot, see how you like it. I think you'll like how it runs, and it's a good candidate for a DCC sound upgrade or just a very basic DCC 8-pin job if you don't want to dump $200 to $300 on the Scaletrains equivalent. Well guys, that brings us to the end of this comparison. Thank y'all again for watching. I hope this covered a little base and something you didn't quite know you wanted to check out, but you did, or if you just had any curiosities to see just how they held up together, here you go. I thank y'all again for watching. It's due to y'all's support that I'm able to keep going, and stay tuned because we got a couple more videos coming, and we're going to have some fun with this set. So I'll see you next time.